some people would call them dark sexual fantasies. When you admit, this is what I like and want to explore, you're free. You're free of shame. But we're told and taught the exact opposite. And that's what's destroying our relationships, our business, all these different things.
Yeah, it's so good what you just said. It's like we have been conditioned to think that we all need to be like perfect cardboard images of who we actually are, but it takes out all of the juice. and it's really cool because it's one of those things where I love, since we're just like admitting things about ourselves, I think it's super freeing. One of the things that I've always felt about myself is like, damn, I'm controlling, like I just am. It's like I just have like a controlling streak. And it's something that I feel like, when I can play with and play with that, you can play with that kind of thing in your sexuality, and it's really fun. And it can be a really fun experience with it. That's kind of where with the domination and submission comes in. Like it's like, and then it's not bad anymore. And I'm not walking around guilty all day wondering with all of my attention, my attention used to be on like, oh, am I being controlling? Because of course, when we're into personal development, we become super self-aware. And then sometimes that ends up being the problem, and I'm like all self-conscious all the time. Like, oh, am I being controlling? Oh, am I being too much? And instead of like actually having an opportunity to really just like let it all out, like you said, in your book, and especially with your partner. This is where like, if you're in a relationship or you're dating, it's like, that's the place where you can really let yourself be seen. And your true desires, I believe your true desires are sharing that is one of the most vulnerable and connection building things that you can do with someone, because it reveals a part of yourself that is so deep, because desire comes from a very deep place based on all kinds of conditioning and stuff. So it's like when we really can admit that, it's like, I'm showing you this part of myself that like, I don't even fully have approval for yet. Can you help me to become okay with myself here?
You mentioned something.
So empowering.
You mentioned something, and I think they have the whole definition of dominant and submissive backwards. Because in my experience, whether it's a man or woman, classic women who pursue being submissive are that type A, kick ass, smart as hell. They don't need a man. They are incredibly controlling. They want everything their way, and yet they want to submit. But as we already discussed, the submissive is in control. So they're still in control of things because they get to decide the playground. Whereas, and men, same thing. You hear that a lot because, executives, CEOs, they pursue dominant women. Well, the dynamic is different, and no dominant ever gets to do whatever they want. They're told this is what's okay. So in reality, the roles are reversed, or, they should have the names in the opposite, because the one who's truly submitting is the so-called one in power. But they're really not. It's a false power. And so a lot of people have that misunderstanding. So women especially go, I'll never be submissive. But yet they just have the understanding incorrect. They already, based on what society calls submission, they already are. They're dominating everyone and everything. But we have everything in the opposite, and we're unaware of it.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's fun because I like it. I mean, just to get really personal here, because I think it's helpful for people. Like I like trying, like it's like setting it up where it's like I'm trying to control the situation, but it's like I don't get to. And that for me is like it's like I need that kind of like I need to be able to push against and then be like, okay. Because so often in my life, I'm like, I don't get told no, or, it's like I don't experience this, this pushback. And when I do, it's like, it's like I find my humanity again in a certain way. And it's very enjoyable. So it's almost like, I mean, you're right. I mean, I guess it is, the submissive is still in control in a certain way. And it's the experience of like, no. And then it's like that just does something for me, and it fills in a part of myself that I don't experience often in my waking and everyday life.
That's a very good point. I'll get into more of that too, because I've been a dominant for 20 some years. And so most women that are attracted to me, it's that dynamic. Now because of the whole 50 Shades of Grey, that destroyed the dynamic because she completely manipulated him. He was never a dominant. What that was is something called topping from the bottom, where she took on a role and slowly sucked him in. He gave away who he was. And as you saw at one point in the movie, he's on his knees begging her, just don't leave me. Well, a dominant would never do that, because what a submissive wants, even though, like you said, you're in complete control, they want moments in a safe way where they don't have it, where they are told no within a certain framework. And that's the vulnerability that they're after. Whether it's a man or a woman, they don't have that space in their life. Like you said, look at what you do for a living. You're basically, in control of your life through your clients, your business, your marketing, everything. And so you're always deciding. At some point, you'd want to break from that where you don't decide. And that's, a CEO, a male CEO, that's exactly what they're looking for, is I just need a break where I just get to follow. Can you show me how to do that? Well, why don't you explain what happens to you intellectually and emotionally when you feel safe enough to let that wall down and be led?
Oh, I mean, I access. I mean, it's the divine feminine energy. It's like I access this part of myself that is so expansive and creative, and I figure out the solutions to problems that I'm dealing with in life, or strategic things that I've been considering from a logical place. It's like and this happens in meditation too, but it's like when we go into the feminine energy, that's when we can really, it's like get these non-linear ansers to problems.
Give us
did you
have an example off the top of your mind where you were in the midst of something like that and something in your life came clear to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
That vulnerability.
Yeah. So I was, so there was, one time, without being too explicit, but it's like I woke up afterwards, not woke up, but came over to my computer and wrote the program, essentially the Erotic Wiring program, completely this entire map of sexuality and sexual desire and how you can turn on different sections of your wiring. It's like it downloaded and just came. The idea came to me, so I wrote it out, and now it's a program I offer. But it was like it came out of nowhere. It was like I just knew what it was suddenly. So it was like there was a new piece of information, because through sex, we can really tune into some there's like an ancient energy there. There's a divine energy there. There's primal energy. There's so many different kinds of energy that we can tune into if we are using our sex life as a tool, instead of just something that we kind of do the same way all of the time and never really think about that. And one of the things that you said earlier that I think is really important to just name here is you talked about what I would call the container, or the setup for a dominant and submissive interaction. And I think that's an important piece for like anyone out there who's like, well, how do I start this? Like, where do I even start? Is actually in creating the setup of the container. So it's like having a conversation with your partner of like, hey, what if we we took a different perspective on our sex life? What if we actually started exploring some things that we both want a little more? What would be available for us? I mean, I think we could have deeper connection. I think some of the fights that we're having is maybe some of this pent up energy of things that we really want, but aren't being expressed, and they don't have a place to do that. So maybe we can create our sex life as a context for this, and have a 2-hour sex date night per week. I mean, that's one of the assignments I give people often is like, take a 2-hour period and actually explore. And so I think that the setup of this is so important, or else you can't just like go from having plain old boring, like just whatever your version of normal default sex is, where there's no creativity involved. You're just having the default sex. You can't go from that to like dominance and submission, like perfectly smoothly overnight. I mean, it's like there's going to be a clunky process, and it needs to have a real container and a place where you put it, and okay, now we're doing that thing, and then it gets to end. And I think that's what creates the safety also for the submission, for the submissive, is it's like we are in a container and it's over in an hour, and like I might feel out of control right now, but I know that it's going to be done in an hour, and I know that everything is set up and agreed upon beforehand.
Yeah. And really what you're describing is vulnerability and intimacy. Look, this is really who I am and what I think and feel. And so much of sex, like when I had to really do a lot of work around sex because I used sex as an addiction when I was younger. It was a coping skill because I didn't have the skills to overcome the trauma and things I'd been through. So for me, it was destructive. And I just didn't have the information. I didn't know how to overcome the overwhelming feelings inside of me. So I was using it to try and fill a hole until I learned the difference of how to use it for me, not against me. And the biggest key I learned was, again, that fear of being known. And this is who I am. And so like when I would work, I ran sex addiction groups and stuff. And so there were simple things like, you must kiss with your eyes open. You must have sex with your eyes open. You must have a conversation before and after about desires and interests, because so much of sex is in our head. We're thinking and wanting all these things, but we're so afraid to share it. And because of judgment or shame or all these different things. And so to advance that, to get out of the addiction aspect and into the connection aspect, the only way to do that is to connect. And that takes what you just described. It was total communication.
Absolutely. I love
that. And that made, I forgot to get to this. What you gave there was a solution. One of the things you have your couples or people do. Can you walk us through a bunch of those? Like what are solutions you give to people? Tell us some of those things.
Absolutely. I think one is definitely, I'm a big fan of, I call it sacred scheduling, because so many of my clients live out of their calendars. And then they wonder why they don't have sex that often. And I say, well, is it in your calendar? And so I think that sacred scheduling is a wonderful way to really put the things that matter, not just the things that are urgent, into your calendar. And approach your sex date, your intimacy date with your partner with the same level of preparation, care, and focus that you would a big meeting in the boardroom, and really show up for it and have it be a scheduled meeting. And maybe you only have, 1 or 2 of those a week, right? But you have it scheduled and maybe you guys get there and you don't feel like having sex. I mean, I like to give a whole toolbox of other things that you can do to create and build the intimacy that sometimes is missing on such a deep level that sex just isn't possible. So it's like, for example, oftentimes, and I see this a lot, I'm just going to call it men and women, male-female dynamics, because it's so largely men and female dynamics. So often, man is saying, I'm not, we're not having sex enough. Like what's the deal? And she's always shutting him down. Woman's always